Hello besties, happy December and welcome back to my book channel. Since it is December, which is crazy, I'm filming this on the 2nd. It's wild to me that we're already at the end of the year, but I figured since we are almost on to 2024, I wanted to do an end of the year book tag and talk about all of the books that I've read so far in the year. Again, I still have a month's worth of reading to do, but let's just get right into it. So, number 1 on the list was a book that surprised you, and for me this has to be The Six Deaths of the Saint. Actually, should I put the book over here? I'll put the book over here. Six Deaths of the Saint by Alex E. Harrow. So I learned that this is one of, I think, 7 short stories that a bunch of authors did together. This is like a really short story. It's literally 36 pages, I believe. It's so short, but it's definitely the most popular out of the 7 short stories, and I only read this one, but it's popular because it's so good. So in the most vague way possible, because I don't want to spoil what happens in literally 36 pages, but we follow our main character who is almost told in like second person POV. I think that they are unnamed, and it's a story about going to war and also love and death, and it switches point of view. So we get first person point of view, we get third person, we also get second person, and when I think second person I think of like cookbooks, and so it was crazy to me that a book could be written in second person and also switch point of views but all come together and make sense. I just thought that the writing was genius. I didn't know how she came up with the concept, but I thought it was really interesting, and I thought that she really pulled emotions out of me. Like within 36 pages I gave the book a 5-star, and I think I shed a tear. Like legitimately, it was so short. I read it in less than an hour, but it was so impactful to me for some reason. So it's really good. So if you want just a really quick book that will make you think, and also is just really impeccably written and just very creative in the ways that the author uses different point of views or perspectives in their writing, pick up The Success of the Saint by Alex E. Harrow. This book was really good, and it surprised me whenever I read it. Now on the flip side, I want to talk about a book that disappointed me, and unfortunately for me that is Spark of the Everflame by Penn Cole. So this is a book that got a lot of hype this year because it is indie published, but everyone was absolutely loving this. It's a romantasy following our main character DM, who I'm pretty sure is a human. Yeah, she's immortal, but there are these people called descendants who are basically the sons and daughters of the gods, and so they have magical powers and they are treated as better in society than the mortals, obviously. So there's a lot of discussion about the descendant versus the mortals, and there's rebellion going on, things like that. And again, this was a really hyped book for me. I felt that everyone was really loving this series and loving the romance, and everyone thought it was super fun and, you know, great read. Personally, whenever I picked it up, however, I gave this book 3 stars, and I just did not enjoy it. I felt like the main character DM was so annoying. Like she was a little dumb or oblivious to things that I could guess in the plot way ahead of time. I felt like the romance really wasn't all that. Like it was fine. It checked all the boxes it needed to check, but I didn't feel like it was anything revolutionary or amazing. And I felt like overall it was just kind of boring. Like I just kind of was forcing myself to finish it, to be honest, and I gave it a generous 3 stars because it's not a bad book by any means, but I was really expecting like 4.5, 5-star material from the way that the internet was hyping up this book, and unfortunately it did not give that for me. So this was a disappointing read. Again, not a bad read, and I am probably going to continue this series, at least get 1 book further and see if the series at least gets better, because I've heard that it does get better, but unfortunately, this one was a disappointment for me. So there we go. The next question is kind of a 2-parter. So it asks, what is your favorite book couple or main character of the year so far? So I have 2 books for this. As far as my favorite character, now listen, I have a bajillion and a half favorite characters, okay? Like I love so many characters in all the books that I read. Like I could have answered this question with a whole list of characters, but unfortunately recency bias made me put Will from Clockwork Angel as my favorite character so far. Again, the list could go on, but just for one succinct answer, I'm gonna pick Will from this book because I just finished this book a couple weeks ago and I gave it 5 stars. It's so good. It was a reread. I loved it. But mainly Will in this book I think is my favorite character. He is such a complex and interesting character, and we realize he basically likes to push people away a lot. He likes to hold his emotions close to his chest. He's very dry, very sarcastic. He can be very rude to people. He doesn't want people to get close to him. And so at first he kind of seems like turn-off-ish, you know, but whenever you read further into the series, you realize why he's like this, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but it breaks my heart for him. And so I do have such a soft spot for this character. His relationship with the other characters are also so meaningful. Like Tessa is in a love triangle between him and Jem in this book, so there's a little bit of romance with him, as well as the there is with Jem, but also his relationship with Jem. So he and Jem are parabatai, which means that they are basically shadow hunters who are connected for life. They are deeper than brothers. They're not actually brothers, but like they're friend brothers, you know, and their relationship is so strong because of the magical connection they have with the parabatai connection. So just the brotherly bond between the two of them is just so beautiful. You can tell that he just loves Jem so much, like in a platonic way, and I think that platonic love is not really shown as much in books as romantic love, so I really appreciate his display of platonic love in this book. So overall, I love Will so much. I also love Jem and I also love Tessa, but I think if I had to pick one, Will would be my favorite character out of this particular series. And again, the list could go on forever and ever about my favorite characters, but he just came to mind because of recency bias. As far as my favorite couple, however, I'm going to say there are a bajillion couples that I just love and adore, but if I had to choose one from a book that I haven't talked about already, I would say Joey and Aoife from Saving Six, and also Redeeming Six, which is also on my shelf, but this is the first book about them in the series. They have books 3 and 4 in the series, Binding 13, and I just love Joey and Aoife. Similarly to Will, and I think this this shows a trend for me, I have a soft spot for broken boys in books. I really do. It's probably a toxic problem, but like Joey in this book is so broken, unfortunately. He grew up in such a terrible household full of domestic abuse and violence and drugs and alcohol, and he just grew up that way. And of course the influence from his parents are also trickling down to him, so he gets involved in drugs and alcohol. It really rips up his life. He is essentially the oldest sibling out of like 4 or 5 kids in this family, and so he takes on the pressure to take care of his younger siblings because his parents do not take care of them, and so there's just so much that he's going through. And Aoife in this book is a friend that he meets in the first year of, I think it's essentially 7th grade in US. I think they call it first year in like the UK because this takes place in Ireland. Anyway, so Aoife is this girl, very bubbly, very sociable, very talkative, very lively, although their relationship is just, you know, really sweet and beautiful, and she honestly brings out the emotion in him that he tries to push down, and he helps her just, you know, realize her worth and get out of bad relationships before they actually get together. But also I think that during, especially the second book in this, so Redeeming Six, there is just so much between the two of them that I cannot spoil, but the relationship is beautiful. It makes me cry. I would pick up this series. It's so good. It's amazing. It's so good. The next question is a new favorite author that I discovered this year. So I would say Chloe Walsh, who wrote the Boys of Tommen series, the Binding 13 series, but since I just brought that up, I'm going to bring up someone different, and that is Abby Jimenez. So I read all 3 of the books in the Part of Your World series this year. I read Part of Your World and Yours Truly in February, I believe, February and March, and then I read Just for the Summer when it came out recently this summer, and all 3 of those books are really good contemporary romances. I think they are a great combination of comedy, good romance, healthy relationships, and also just like literary fiction and problems that people actually face outside of their relationships. So whereas most rom-coms, in my opinion, have like a miscommunication trope as the final conflict in the books, I feel like Abby Jimenez is better at creating conflicts externally from the relationship so that the two can stay together and grow with each other and help each other through the conflicts, but there is still a character arc and a plot arc throughout the entire books. So overall, I think these are just really well written. I think I gave all of them 4 stars. Unfortunately, they never pulled a 5-star out of me, but that doesn't really say anything because I am very stingy and picky with my 5 stars. I am still going to read anything that Abby Jimenez writes in the future. I haven't read her first series because honestly people say it's not as good, and I have so many other things on my TBR to prioritize. However, I know she's coming out with either a 4th book in the series or a completely different standalone, I think early next year. So whenever that comes out, I think it's called Remember Me and something like that. When that comes out, I will be reading it immediately. I am super excited to see more from her. She has just been a absolutely banger author for me this year so far. The next question is my favorite cover this year. Now, I was looking at all the covers of the books that I have and the books that I've been reading, even if I've read them digitally, and honestly, I think the cover that stands out is ironically like a 2015, it's kind of old-fashioned, but I think it's beautiful, okay? And that for me is Clockwork Prince. So this is the 2nd book in the Clockwork Angel series, and I just think this cover is stunning. Like, maybe it's just me, like I said, it's very, you can tell that this was written in the early 2010s just in the style of the cover, but I think the art is beautiful. We have the angel up here, there is Jem playing violin at the bottom, and I think just the combination of like golds and silvers, and it's very reflective as you can see from the sun. I think it's just awesome. Like, I don't know, something about this, I just love this cover. And also what's really cool about these physical books is when when you line them up next to each other, the spines have this drawing that is slowly revealed, and then the third book also adds to this, so it's like really pretty to display on the shelves, which is super cool. I love whenever authors put that kind of detail into their physical copies of their books. And I know there is a different edition of these books that have like the main characters like standing up, but I do prefer the ones where they're sitting down like this. I just think that the drawing is beautiful. I really like it. So it may be a little like, is this your best cover? Listen, I don't buy special editions mostly, but I think this one is super pretty. So this has to be the top one on my list. The next question is a book that you haven't stopped thinking about. And I think that this is a surprise to no one whenever I say that Manacled makes my list for this. Manacled is a book that I read in April, and it is I think 1,000 pages of Dramini fan fiction. But hear me out, okay? Hear me out. Whenever I say that, it sounds terrible. Like it sounds like, oh, you were just like reading Wattpad about Dramini. Like, please. This book is so much more than that. It is Dramini fan fiction, which by the way, if you didn't know, is Draco and Hermione from Harry Potter. But this book follows a fictional story of the two of them after the last book of Harry Potter, but it imagines it as if Harry Potter lost the war against Voldemort. So instead of Harry Potter winning like he does at the end of the series, which by the way I don't think is a spoiler because it's a children's book series, of course Harry Potter wins, like come on now. But in this book, Voldemort wins and Harry Potter's dead and Ron is dead and basically everyone is dead except for Snape, Hermione, Draco, and a couple other minor characters like Moody and Kingsley in them. So it's like very, very dark, emotional. And if you've read The Handmaid's Tale by, who is it that writes that? Margaret Atwood, which I read a couple years ago and I did not like, but it basically tells that story if you know the context behind that in a different way. So Voldemort is using what are called the Death Eaters to basically get with Muggles and repopulate because after the war they were like no one left, they're all dead basically. So it's a very horrible situation where Hermione is a Muggle and Draco is a Death Eater. So you can see where I'm going with this unfortunately, but when you hear that concept you're like, oh my god, I want to kill Draco. Why the hell would you think that he is a good love interest? But again, you have to work through the book because the middle chunk of the book, the middle 50%, is a flashback to during the war and so much happens. I'm getting goosebumps on my arms, but it's so good. I really cannot explain it to you. You just have to sit and read it. It flies by so fast. It's so emotional. I laughed, I cried, I was like screaming at the book at some points. I would watch trigger warnings with this book for sure, but all that to say, this book has been on my mind. It's paying rent up in here and it's fantastic. But let's move on. Let me stop ranting. Let's continue. So the next question is, what is my favorite reread from this year? And I'm actually a very firm believer in rereading books. Like I said, I was rereading the Clockwork series this year. I reread Saving Six. So I actually have 2 books for this question that I haven't already mentioned today. So the first one I want to talk about is Heir of Fire. I reread Heir of Fire and Queen of Shadows, which are book 3 and 4 in my favorite fantasy series ever, Throne of Glass. Like I said, it's up here on my shelf. All of the books are 5 stars to me, all of them. But although I love Queen of Shadows probably a little bit more than Heir of Fire as far as the plot goes, it's just so much more interesting. There's more romance. Like Queen of Shadows is where everything comes together and we're just really in it, you know? But Heir of Fire is necessary to work towards that because this is where we get introduced to most of the magic system that happens in Throne of Glass. This is where we meet a couple of characters that we've never met before, and this really adds to the plot. Like, you need this book. And I read this book, like I said, for the first time like years ago, but rereading it this year made me realize that not only can Sarah J. Maas write an incredible fantasy book, but she can also write incredible character development and character arc, because our main character, Selena, in this book, the changes that she goes through from the beginning to the end of this book are absolutely incredible. She goes from literally being like, basically, I wouldn't say suicidal, but she is on her last leg, okay, at the start of this book. And by the end of this book, she has completely transformed herself with the help of other people. And I think that that process of watching our main character just go through so much change in a book is what makes it so incredible. So this has to be one of my favorite rereads of the year by far. But also I wanted to say Sea of Ruin by Pam Godwin I reread over the summer. And I read this book about 2 years ago and I really enjoyed it. This book is kind of a hot mess, but in a really good way. I gave it 5 stars the first time and I gave it 5 stars the second time, and just rereading it proves to me how much I loved it and how good this book is. So this book basically follows our main character, Benedict, who is a female pirate in I think the 18 something, so it's a definitely historical fantasy. And as you can assume, there are not many female pirates. So she is definitely underestimated because she is a woman, but she does not let that stop her, okay? She is a badass and she's going to tell everybody about it. And she gets captured by this pirate hunter from the Navy named Ashley, and so she has to live on Ashley's boat for a while. So while there is love interest Ashley, there's also the love interest Priest, who has history with her. Now I don't want to explain everything because that would lead into spoiler territory, but let's just say that 2 years ago her and Priest were very close, and since they have separated, and so there is a little bit of a love triangle between either Ashley, who is the pirate hunter, or Priest, and the three of them kind of have a love triangle, and then it becomes a why choose. So definitely like a hot mess of a lot of spicy scenes. I will say that this book you have to really watch trigger warnings for because there is a lot in this book, but overall it is just so good, and I gave it 5 stars again. So if this book sounds intriguing to you, Pam Godwin's Sea of Ruin was just really, really good. Okay, the next question asks, what books from this year are the lowest rated and highest rated on Goodreads, and do you agree with them? So the highest book on Goodreads is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. This has an average of a 4.63 rating on Goodreads. So if that doesn't tell you how good this book is, I don't know what is. I definitely agree with this rating. I read and annotated this book about a month and a half ago, and I gave it 4 stars. It was just really, really good. This book is a historical literary fiction that follows main characters Vianne and Isabel, who are sisters in France in World War II. They both have very different experiences during the Nazi occupation of France, and their stories are just so intense, it's so amazing and so beautiful, and it talks about love and friendship and sisterhood and what you have to do whenever you're faced with difficult choices in war. And I think that Kristen Hanna just tackles this content so wonderfully. The writing is good, but you also feel so connected to the characters, and everything in here felt potent and it felt necessary, and this was just a really like life-changing read. So I really, really enjoyed this book, and I want to read more by Kristen Hanna because I've heard that her other historical fictions are also really, really good, so I'll be picking up more by her. And I absolutely agree with the rating of a 4.63. Like I said, I gave it 4 stars. It was really, really fantastic. However, as far as the lowest rated book on my Goodreads that I've read this year, this shocked me to find out, but For the Wolf by Hannah Grace was a 3.6. Now that's not the lowest rating ever. There are definitely books on my Goodreads that are rated lower. I just haven't read them this year. I read them in past years. That being said, I think that Goodreads is generally pretty high. You will really never find a book with an average rating of like a 1 or a 2 star. So having this be a 3.6 isn't terrible, but it is the lowest, and that was absolutely shocking to me. Like this book, I gave 5 stars. Now here's the thing. I can understand the complaints behind this book, okay? People said that this book is very slow, it's very boring, nothing really happened. I disagree, but I get where they're coming from because the book is kind of slow and it is very just like quiet. It's not a very upbeat, high epic fantasy. It's very, you know, slow and dreary until we get into the final fights at the end of this book. However, I really enjoyed the vibes of this book throughout the entire thing. I thought that the slow, cozy, eerie vibes really felt like it matched the magic system in here. The characters are wonderful. By the way, this is let me explain the plot maybe. This is a fantasy romance about a girl named Red or Radaris, and it's basically a Red Riding Hood retelling. So in this book series, the first sister is the monarchy, or she gets the throne, and then the second sister goes to this monster in the woods who is the wolf, but turns out the wolf is not actually evil, so she goes to the woods to stay with him for X amount of reasons, etc., etc. You find out in this book, but I think that it was just really, really good. I gave it 5 stars. I really enjoyed it, and I don't agree with it being the lowest rated book on Goodreads from my read list this year so far. So hopefully, well, not hopefully, I was gonna say hopefully I read something else in December that would be lower than this, but also I don't want to read something in December that's lower than this. I want to read good books, so let's just say that I disagree with this and call it flat. So the next question asks about my Goodreads reading goal and my reflection going into 2025. So my reading goal for this past year was reading 50 books. That's been my goal for the past 2 or 3 years, and I've always hit it just about at 50 or 51. However, this year, as of December 2nd, I've already read 65 books. So I'm 130% through my reading goal, which is really, really good. I've read so much this year, which I'm really, really proud of. And going into 2025, I'm debating upping my reading goal from 50 to 65 because I think that I can do it since I did it this year. And also since I have a reading channel now that I started in May of this year, I feel more inclined to read more often, and I'm excited about reading more often. However, I don't want to also stress myself into reaching a high goal. So maybe I should keep it at 50. I don't know. We'll see. I might put it at 65 to challenge myself, but also if I don't reach it, I think that's totally okay. But then also I'm always someone that strives for validation, so like I want to reach that goal. So we'll see. But 50 books I definitely reached this year, which I'm super proud of. And then the last question are books that I didn't get to this year, but I wanted to get to. And again, I still have a month left, but I'm not gonna lie, who knows what's gonna happen this month? I have so many books I want to read, so who knows? But I do want to list a couple books that were on my TBR that I didn't get to this year, unfortunately. Number 1 is Throne of the Fallen, which is on my winter TBR for this year, I believe, so I will hopefully get to it in the next couple of months. Also When the Moon Hatched, Heartless Hunter, which I've heard so many good things about, and I need to get to this book because I know that's the second one in the duology is coming out, I think early next year, so I need to get to this one ASAP. Cruel Prince series was on my fall TBR and I never got to it. In my defense, I did buy the first book from Penguin Books, but the seller kind of canceled the order, so I never actually got it. I got a refund, but I never got the book, so I'll try to buy it again from someone else and see if I can retrieve it for a cheap price. And then the last one on my list here is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I never actually read a thriller this year. I was hoping I can get into some thriller at some point during the fall, but I never did. Well, I read one romantic thriller, but I gave it 1 star, so that doesn't really count. I wanted to get into like popular thrillers like Good Girl's Guide to Murder. Well, actually it's more of a mystery, to be honest. Mystery thriller. Same category. Anyway, that being said, those are the books, or at least a couple that I didn't get to, but I definitely want to get to and are definitely on my TBR going into December and 2025. So that is my end of the year reading tag. If you have any other questions you want to ask me, drop them in the comments below. I will try to answer them for you. And again, we still have 1 more month, so hopefully I can get to some really good reads in the month of December. If you like this video and want to see more book content from me, make sure to subscribe. I post new videos every single Thursday, and we're gonna have so many fun videos coming out in the rest of this year. I'm sending you guys so much love. Have an amazing day. And if you want to watch my last vlog, which was winter book recommendations and my TBR, I'll put it right here on the screen. Goodbye.